What do we mean when we talk about the in-between, the nexus of our lives, of our reality? So often when we look back at our lives, we look at the milestone moments, these plateaus and footprints that we leave behind as markers of our life's journey. That only makes up about 20 to 30%. The rest is defined and connected by the in-between. Everything that takes place in between. And this is where the art of the spiritual warrior comes in. We can develop the tools and the means to identify all these different elements in our world and become the alchemists of our lives, peering through the nexus and the prism of our multiverse and drawing forth all that we are into the present now. Whew! Good day, good Friday, everybody. Welcome back to the Wolf's Den. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful Friday. I woke up to a blizzarding snowstorm up at my mountain resort this morning, which was gorgeous in an interesting way to say, as a lot of people wouldn't think that on May 17th, waking up to 4 to 6 inches of snow would be beautiful, but it was. So much so that I decided to get up first thing and put on my best Canadian accent, and I did a video just to make fun and find the enjoyment out of the moment, because that's our greatest superpower, is to change the perspective of the reality, to engage in it in a way that benefits us in all aspects. So I hope your Friday is going similarly. I'm glad I could make it on time today. I wasn't sure if I was going to be a little bit late with a pre-booked another work meeting that I had, but thankfully divine timing, obviously I needed to be here. I wanted to talk to you guys, so it's a pleasure to be back. What are we going to talk about today? Well, today I think we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on. I'm sure everybody has been seeing all of the incredible posts from last weekend and the that light show that took place. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. I can even talk a little bit about some of the byproducts that came from so many of the events that have just been coming back to back to back for us lately. And there's a reason. So let's chat. Let's talk. Is it story time today? Maybe. We'll find out. I'll let you know, because obviously there's a theme song. Have you been paying attention? So, I mean, we could go back. Let's talk a little bit about, I even want to talk a little bit about last winter. Let's go back to around October, November-ish there. I don't follow celebrity gossip by any means, but when it comes into my feed, when I'm doing stuff, whether it's on research or I'm just online connecting with people, whatever, when it comes into my feed, I go, oh, there's something to pay attention here. So I started noticing that right at the end of last year, at the end of 2023, there was a big push in disclosure in Hollywood and what was going on. So, and we've been seeing kind of little trickle effects from it over the last few years in particular. One of the big ones that I know a lot of people remember from a couple of years ago is the Will Smith, Chris Rock slap. And so much of this stuff is literally meant to just shake up the norm, right? You want to look for meaning, you want to look for strategy behind it. I'm sure you could probably find it, but the most simplistic way to put these kind of puzzle pieces together is to just say, oh, this was meant to shake up the board. So when I started seeing the domino effects from that, it led me to have some stuff pop up at the end of last year. And there were some things going on. Cat Williams was coming out and just annihilating people with truth. Like, it was so beautiful. There have been so many celebrities that get written off as crazy and schizophrenic and drug addicts that got deep enough in, saw what they saw, and said, I'm busting the lid open on this stuff. And controlling the narrative of how people see you is exactly how you get the world to believe you're crazy, you're schizo, you've got drug problems, whatever. And it makes you completely incredible from that point forward. Not incredible in so just you've got no credit to your name at that point. Um So when I started seeing the things like Cat Williams and the Jeffrey Epstein stuff that happened a few years back too, right? Like there's so many of these celebrity type things that have been on the horizon. And now we've got this whole Diddy aspect that's going on, and there's supposed to be just names and lists of them across the board, and it's just about time. It really and truly is, because even when we look at the history of Hollywood, I don't know how many people know that back in the days of wizardry and magic and alchemy, they would make their wands out of a specific wood called Hollywood. So, I mean, there's research to do, people. That's all I can say. There's research to do. I could go on and on and on, but at this point, what I'm seeing is that the disclosure is right on track with everything. And again, it's meant to shake the board up. It's meant for all of us to see things in a completely different way than we were conditioned to see them subconsciously. Now we're consciously looking at things. And it's meant to shake things up in a way, too, where we understand where the value of certain systems at play are actually adding benefit to our lives, and where the value comes from, and where it's not. Oh, sorry, my nose is bugging me. Oh my God. Where it's not the system necessarily that's corrupt, it's the way it's being operated, right? Because I've had this discussion with a lot of people where there's this kind of romantic idea of going all the way back to living in tree houses and caves and everything, is it basically devolving is the next best way to do it. And I don't agree with that. I think that finding the next step is about bridging all of the things that we've done up to this point. It shouldn't be this or that. It should be this and that. We should be able to combine things in a way where we're utilizing and harmonizing ourselves with nature, with the environment, and still able to advance in ways that make life easier, that benefit us, that allow us to explore and expand beyond our own horizons. So I think that bridging is the next step. And part of that has to do with some of the ancient teaching, stuff like Tartaria, for example, even the things that Nikola Tesla was tapping into. There's really ancient methods of doing this, but back then they didn't have the capacity of utilizing it. And now we have the capacity, but we don't have the knowledge or the resources. So it's about bridging all of that together, I feel. And in order to do that, we also have to raise our own capacity to this new stage, right? Because there's no point in repeating the cycles of reinstituting resources and knowledge if we're just going to misuse them again. So a lot of what's been happening for us, let alone just the disclosure across the planet, but for us personally on a spiritual level, we're being called to calibrate ourselves. We're being called to really see where we are in the universe with ourselves, with our development, with our alignment. And the events that have been taking place, from all of my observations and experience with it, are clearly showing me that we're being hit right now with the frequencies that are required of that new evolution, right? So when we go back to a lot of the old shows that we've talked about, how frequency affects the way that we live our lives. Frequency affects the physical reality that we experience, right? Because that's the distinction between the infinite bands of the multiverse. So right now, what I feel is happening with a lot of the events, from the Black Sun rising to some of the stuff that's happening internally in the earth that a lot of people don't know about, some of the cymatic frequencies that have been taking place, that have been part and parcel of some of the natural events and earthquakes, tsunamis, things like that. Cymatic frequencies literally change the physical outlay of something. So there's a lot of that that's happening. The light show, and I'm very clearly calling it a light show, that just happened was all part of this new frequency, these new bandwidths of frequency that are coming to humanity, coming to this plane of existence. And if you haven't noticed, it's causing a massive, I don't want to say disruption, but a blender effect is maybe a good way of putting it. I've seen it cause a lot of disruption in some people's world. There's like chaos happening, one thing after another, after another, after another. And to really strong souled people, and the ones that are kind of going into those breaks in psychosis were the ones that were very much conditioned to just go along with the programming on stuff. So I'm seeing the breakdown happening with it affecting very deeply the people who were subconsciously going through the experience of life, and it's literally put them into a psychosis break where they're just not there anymore. And it's crazy. Like, some of the effects that we're seeing are absolutely crazy in people. And for the really strong souled people that have been, doing the work through these shifts, they're being tested with this. They're getting hit all directions, left, right, center, up, down, from these waves of psychosis breaks, I guess. And it's basically calibrating the strong souls to say, how high can you raise your frequency? Are you able to rise above this shift that's taking place and go with this changing energy? Or is it going to overtake you and you're going to succumb to it and become these frequencies? Because when we're raising ourselves into a new state, everything that's not a part of that higher state of frequency surfaces. It all comes to the surface. And this happens when we're doing shadow work. This happens when we're doing any type of internal elevation or rise. We shed the pieces of ourselves that are no longer pertinent in where we're headed to in those new shifts. The only thing that stops us from letting that stuff go is us, is we see it when it surfaces and we go, oh, this appeared, I must deal with it, we put all of our attention into it, and then we actually choose that frequency shift and we go right back into it instead of allowing it to surface, shed off of us like we need to. Say, I acknowledge your presence, thank you for being present, to show me that I don't want to be a part of that frequency anymore, to show me that I'm rising to something higher. Points of reference, right? So it's an incredible shift that so many of us are going through, even though it seems very difficult for a lot of us at this point too. We got some questions coming in. Let's check out some questions or some comments. We've got, oh, yes, we've got Sharon saying her heart hurt so much today. Shedding. Yes, a lot of this is taking place, and I honor it so deeply. And please honor it within yourself. Let the tears, let whatever surfaces come to the surface. Don't fight it. You don't even have to embrace it. Just allow it. Know that you get to choose your state of frequency. Just because it appears doesn't mean you have to choose it. This is your power. So honor the fact that you are literally shedding pieces of yourself that are very clearly surfacing to show you they're not a part of the frequency that you're heading into, which is why they're surfacing. They're trying to remove themselves. So let them remove themselves and honor them for showing you a contrast of a choice, of a preference in frequency that you get to shift yourself into. It's such a beautiful state. Okay. Alex, can we speak to Atlantis and how this in our DNA is too deep fit? Okay. Oh, this is an interesting premise that we're going to get into. Okay. And this is actually a great question to ask because it ties into a lot of what's happening with the frequency shifts in the stuff like the light show that just took place, the Black Sun. So, from everything that I know about Atlantis, Atlantis was they were one of the knowledge keeping civilizations of the time of a lot of this higher frequency multi-dimension stuff. And I think I talked about this a little bit on a show with Tanya and Norma as well. Um, from my perspective and from my understanding, each one of those kind of key civilizations, when we're looking at them, Sumeria, Egypt, Atlantis, all of them shared knowledge with each other. They were very open to the exchange of cosmic and universal knowledge. But each civilization kind of had a specialty about them, where Egypt really focused on the power of reincarnation and how to enhance the cycle of the next life experience by learning to take power from the past lives experience. Even though, again, in the quantum, it's all connected, they were focused on that particular process of being here in the third experience. Sumeria had a little bit more of a blend, but it looked like they were more into the cosmology, sorry, not cosmology, the astrology, but inner earth connection between astrology and the very physical plane that we're living on, which is where sharing that knowledge came into play, why the pyramids were built in certain patterns of constellations and in certain alignments with ley lines across the planet. This was part of that Sumerian specialty. Atlantis, they were the geneticists. They absolutely dove right into DNA manipulation, restructuring, recombinations, the culmination of different species. And this was part of the Star Nation teachings of how humanity even came to be, the blending of 12 different DNA strands from Star Nation cultures that came down and said, oh, we can help this process of evolution into something greater than any one of our races could be individually. So Atlantis really latched onto those basic Star Nation kind of building blocks of what made humanity to begin with. So when they started looking deep into the DNA structures of stuff, and this is where I get say capacity has shifted as an overall premise, because things were so early introduced to them. They just wanted to dive. They just wanted to dive, go into every crevice and corner. And to a degree, we still have that now. We still want to explore absolutely further than maybe we're ready to at certain points in time. And I can attest to that. But I think a little bit of that has to do with the fact that so much information has been withheld from our history that if we don't take awareness to it, it's doomed to repeat itself. So we're going to continue to repeat cycles over and over, just like we do in our personal lives, until we take a conscious awareness to the actual repetition of the cycle and say, oh yeah, we're not going to do that again. We're going to do something different this time. And luckily, as a whole, we have a generalized capacity for the state of evolution that's taking place for the majority of us, that we know thresholds. We understand the value of thresholds and when it's meant to push past those barriers, and when there are certain things that you just leave to creation's doing. Atlantis really wanted to be the carriers of that and the cultivators of this. So, we talk about mermaids, we talk about centaurs, we talk about, any of these types of chimera DNA blending type creatures. And a lot of that was Atlantic teachings. We're there, I guess, when we want to talk about failure, because the question is, can we speak to Atlantis and how this is in our DNA too deep failure that happened? So it's a little, I understand it. It's just articulated interesting, but I understand the question. There was a failure point that happened when they didn't stop going. They didn't realize, okay, here's good. Let's see what our creations do now with the natural state of creation. You play too much with something, you're basically trying to fix something that isn't broken, and it just makes a mess. It continues with problems. So there was a little bit of that took place, and as far as I know, internal discord with that, because some of the culture didn't agree with how far things were going, and some of them were okay with it. Um, as far as the whole failure within our DNA, I don't think that there was anything like programmed specifically back then in the way that we evolved to create any types of blockages or failures or things like that. What I think happened is, again, because that knowledge was so withheld from us, we missed out on the potentiality of evolving differently. We could be in a very different point of physical and societal evolution had we had awareness to some of this knowledge from the past and implemented it in a much more generalized way. But I don't think that there was anything back then to program failure. I think that they took lessons from the margins of people who received that knowledge in the secret sects of how things are operated in the world, that utilize that within certain things like the vaccinations and chemtrails and all this other crap that does actually affect us on a genetic level. Just for memory, yeah. So it's our memories and Atlantis. I mean, I'm sure the DNA stuff had something to do along with how we retain memory, but a lot of that has to do with more Lumeria. The Lumerians, when they were first introduced to third dimension experience, it was very interesting to them to see the linearity of how things played out within this realm, because within Lumerian, and this comes from higher fifth dimensional awareness, everything is in the right now. There's no past, there is no future, there is simply the immediate right now. So to create things like memories or envisionments of the future was something that was really unknown to Lumerians, and they understood that in order to tap into something like that, they required a medium. They required some thing, an extension of themselves that was still connected to them, but could hold on to this stuff, because the way that their DNA and the way that their frequency was encoded, they didn't have the ability or the capacity to actually retain what we would consider to be linear experience or linear knowledge. So this is where star seed crystals, Lumerian seed crystals, were first introduced within the cosmos. And when you look at a Lumerian seed crystal, it's got little bands, stripes going all the way through it, almost like a record, like a vinyl record. And it responds in the same way, where there's information and there's data that's encoded within each one of those lines across the entire crystal and within the crystal. And all of that has to do, when you find your Lumerian crystal, that's all of your physical experiences, all of that linearity that has been recorded. And it's basically just a way for you to flip through the pages almost, right? Within our own personal ability to retain memories as experiences and project envisionments of the future, that is such an incredible psychic gift that so many of us don't actually even realize is a psychic gift. Because every time we look at a memory, what we're actually doing is we're activating, first of all, on a physical, scientific level, not even just spiritual, but physical, you're activating the exact same parts of the brain that activate during a dream state or a heavy state of imagination. When we go back into our memories, it's the same parts of our brain that are activating as when we're dreaming, which tells me that those envisionments, the frequency, the entire experience of simply gazing at what I feel is a memory is no different than dreaming. I'm just deciding that that experience and how I'm taking it in is actually affecting me, that it had something to do with me being who I am right now. We don't do that with dreams. We feel that way sometimes when we first wake up, and we gave into the dream so deeply that it takes us, a little while to shake back into our state, be like, oh no, 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 I'm here. I'm in my bedroom. I'm okay. I'm gonna go make coffee, whatever, whatever. But it's the distinction of we believed it so deeply before we realized we can believe in something else, and then we let go of that, right? So memory is simply a psychic ability to peer into the multiverse of experiences of something that took place and is still taking place in a moment of now, and simply envision it, looking through the entire cosmos, the infinity, and saying that that's a point that I can anchor to because I believe it happened to me, and we bring it forth into us. When we do the envisionments of the future, it's almost the exact same premise where we're peering through the multiverse and we are envisioning a potentiality of where we could end up based on desires, circumstances, all these other elements that we want to put into play. And that ability can really take us into some incredible states of awareness when we allow it to. Because when we're peering into the past and we're taking from the past into the now, we can affect that the same way on how we let traumas affect who we are now. And I'm specifically saying that. I'm not invalidating the fact of somebody going through a traumatic experience. I've gone through many, but I've refused to let any one of them make me traumatized. That's a choice. That's something I have to carry, and I just refuse to do it. So when we do that, understand that we can do that on a positive level as well. Where if we want to go back to memories and we have this attachment to them that we're constantly bringing from certain points in that multiverse into the right now, into our current definition of the now, well, flip the script. If we're using the same parts of our brain, the same parts of our frequency that we would use when we're dreaming, when we're imagining something, as we are when we're doing those memory lapses, well, kick your imagination in, change the memory. It's not lying to yourself. It's creating the reality you want to live in. You don't have to invalidate the things that happen to you to say, I'm going to change your definition. This took place within an experience that I can see, that I can feel in my frequency. So, being the sovereign cosmic presence and entity that I am, I'm gonna choose the definition of how that experience plays into my world, plays into my reality. So there's a lot of power in how we're able to take from that psychic link into how we look into the past. Same thing with the future, but this has a little bit of a different context to it because when we peer into the future, and this goes for even when we're using things like um, tarot cards, crystal balls, pendulums, any type of divination tool or practice. They're great. I use them all the time. But I also understand that when we use them, it's in the given moment. The frequency that I'm in the moment of the practice, in the moment of using it. And on top of that, some of it's going to be bias on my own frequency where I'm not tapping into the indifference of the universe. I'm putting a question out in a way that the universe is going to give me the answer that I want to hear. So it's very interesting to take these sorts of awarenesses on how we're peering into the future because the future is ever shifting. I look at it as it's almost just like a pool of water where it's ever rippling. You can never look at the exact same spot of water twice. It doesn't it just it will not be there. So it's the same thing with the future. How the future, when we're looking at the future, there's a general frequency. And I've talked about this a lot in the last few shows. Tapping into the frequency allows the future to align itself in a way that can go beyond our expectations. So to peer in and see one version of it and then go to universe and say, hey, I saw that and I know better than you do. So give me what I saw. We could be completely limiting ourselves from something that could be beyond our wildest expectations, so far beyond what we envisioned, but we forced that to come. And then it turned out to be maybe not everything we expected it to be. So when we're peering into the future, when we're using this psychic link, it's really important to allow our state of frequency to be the thing that dictates how the future unfolds. It's not the series of events. It's not about expectations or wants. Initiate your intention based off of passion. What excites you? What gets you just singing from the inside out and vibrating, electrified? Then carry through how that plays out, because your frequency is going to allow whatever experiences are a part of the frequency. We don't really get to dictate that. We get to dictate how we receive it. We get to dictate our accountability for our frequency. So it's going to give us everything that is a part of that. And a lot of it we don't expect because we don't know how universe operates. It's indifferent. So allowing those series of events to play themselves out how they need to, simply within the state of belief and faith that, oh yes, this is all part of the frequency. I don't have to worry about anything. It's all part of the frequency. And it allows us to carry into those links into the future and into those shifts of the frequency into the future so much easier, and allows us to get out of our own damn way when we're doing it, which is so important. So I hope that, I trailed a little bit there from Atlantis stuff, but I hope that covers some of it. And I'm always up for, booking sessions with people and having one-on-ones and talking a little bit more about this stuff. Please come check me out on my website and reach out. I'm on Facebook, Alexander Willems. Come find me on Facebook. What else do we want to talk about? So let's talk a little bit about the light show. If you saw the light show, throw it up in the comments firsthand, because I know a lot of people did. I don't want to say, I can say aurora, but it wasn't the aurora borealis to me. And I don't care if this is going to stir up opinions or not. The northern lights seen around the world is not a natural event. This was influenced by something. Now, by what opens up a whole series of questions, bit of a Pandora's box, if you will, because this is where I was just talking about earlier. Our frequencies are rising, right? So we're having certain things that are taking place as events that are in alignment with those frequencies that are pumping stuff into us, light and sound, and like I said, the cymatic frequency stuff. All of these things are happening basically at the same time, like back to back to back to back to back. And it's putting us in a position of kind of fight or flight almost, and how are we handling this? How are we owning our own space? Are we being accountable for our own frequency, regardless of the indifference of the universe? So with the light show, with the aurora that took place, this was very clearly what I saw. People that I know that have, like, we're in the ages from 50s to 80 in some instances, and sometimes older. I've had conversations with such a wide range of people, that all the stories that I'm hearing from the past on how many clear nights they would see these incredible borealis, and in the spots you're supposed to see them the best. Nobody ever saw an event like this before. Like this was, the natural photos and videos all looked like photoshops, right? Like it looked like something, I don't want to say fake because it wasn't fake, it was a real event, but something was influencing this. What I feel happened was there was light and sound frequency that was melded together at the same time as the solar flares. Let's not forget about these damn solar flares that just took place either. Um, I feel that light and sound frequencies were being pumped, they were being calibrated at a certain way that created that event, right? And you can see how people reacted and responded since then. It affected people in such a way that, don't get me wrong, it was a beautiful thing to take place, but look at the signs. That's all I can say is check your own frequency, check the world around you. How have things played out since the event? We can't just wait for something like that to happen and go, oh, nothing showed up, nothing came out of the sky, I guess it's over. It stretches. Time is not a real concept that's counted by minutes and hours and days. It's simply the progression of experience, and that takes place based off of the experience. There's nothing really else to it. So I really do feel that there's still even more to come from those frequencies that we were hit with, and the cymatic stuff that's taking place from inner Earth that's creating this shift. Another thing I want to talk about, the aurora, I feel that it had to do not just with light and sound, but with the magnetics, so with the pole shift. And the Hollywood beta putting things out for us, because this is a huge part of the disclosure, where they're I believe they have a timeline. I really do. I feel, and according to prophecies, between 2027 and 2028, there's supposed to be some kind of disclosure event, like actual encounter disclosure event that has taken place or is taking place right around that time frame. And I know I was just talking about time doesn't get counted like this, blah, 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 but it's within that realm that something is being felt, something is being expected by, elder prophets and certain government ops, things like this. So something is being expected around that time. And if you notice the shift in media over the last few years, I want to say since 2016, 2017 in particular, so much has been hitting us with interdimensional, multiversal, alien contact. We've always had little pieces of movies like that before, but the way that it came out over these last kind of 6-ish years or so, 6 to 8 years, it has been just the main topic, right? The literal main topic, from not just movies and TV shows to going on to talk shows and podcasts, and like this is everywhere. It's happening in government Senate buildings. So there's talk that is supposed to be coming to fruition. So what I saw just before the Borealis took the event, the light show happened, the aurora showed up, and it didn't click until after the light show. But it's so funny. I was watching on Disney Plus. They have a revival of the new X-Men series from back in the 90s. It's called X-Men 97. I love that shit. It is such inner child medicine to me. I just freaking love that shit. So the fact that they picked it up right from where the old series left off and got some of the old voice actors, and like my nostalgia was in, my inner child was going like, yes, I'm rocking the show. It's awesome. And they did some cool stuff, like not just from a fandom perspective, but from this new spirituality that I see things in, and this new lens that I see things in. Stories are interpreted differently, and that affects my reality differently. So they even had some stuff going on of like fighting your inner demons and then learning the blending and the power of light and darkness, and how to truly balance oneself without being susceptible to extreme on either end. Because if we're too light, it basically becomes like the gardener in a war, right? Where you're just kind of weak, and you're harmless, and the universe doesn't care if you're defenseless. So there's a point of being too passive and too giving, but then there's also the extreme of being too aggressive, too dark, too harsh. Finding that blending allows us to keep our own peace, which then gives us the power to learn to keep the peace in the world around us as well, not giving into either side. So there was really good stories like that. The week before the Aurora showed up, the episode was Magneto just comes back on the scene again after being like kidnapped for a few episodes or something and experimented on, blah, 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 blah. He snapped and he's going full genocide on Earth. I'm wiping everybody out. And what he did is he took himself to the poles. I don't know if it was north or south, but he took himself to the poles and he sent out this magnetic wave that just shifted everything and shut all the power down, and it shifted, like literally shifted the Earth itself. And when he was floating down in the presence of all of that magnetism and that frequency, in the sky was the Aurora Borealis. And I didn't notice it the week of because I didn't even know the Aurora was an event that was taking place. Wasn't on my radar. So then it happened. And then I'm watching the next week episode a few days later, and it's showing the recap, and I see the Aurora, and I go, oh, you bastards. And they showed it to us, like, clearly there are things taking place, and they're trying to give hints as to how we can comprehend some of these things that they dropped the ball on for decades, for centuries even. If we had these information given to us piece by piece by piece as we evolved, we wouldn't have to worry about shock value when it comes to this stuff. But currently we do. And shock value is a very real thing that would absolutely impact a majority of the populace. To drop all of these reality, life-shattering experiences and revelations into them all at once. Like, you can't. It's hard enough for people to even deal with the fact of like having a partner cheat on you. That's life-shattering enough. Think about what that does to a psyche, just as an instance like that, let alone understanding the whole aspect of human creation and multiversal existence. Like, this is not something you just force feed people. You can't. And you can't expect it to happen all at once and them to just be like, oh yeah, no, that's cool. It's fine. So I understand the position that we're in. I just don't judge it, you know. Hello, Carolyn. Pleasure to see you. Welcome to the show. What else? So yeah, like I said, there's things that are happening that they're showing us bits and pieces of to get us ready for. People that have the streaming app Tubi, Tubi, free streaming app. Honestly, I love it because it has one of the best collections of disclosure content on there that I've seen on pretty much any of the other streaming platforms. They've got some real conference hearings, like the 3 parts disclosure conference hearing that just took place back last year with David Grush, a military op who came out and he was a whistleblower. If you haven't seen that, go watch it. Great stuff. And just like an incredible series of movies, documentaries and sci-fi movies where these people knew something and then they just made a movie about it. There was one that I saw just a few nights ago. It was called Proximity. And it was about a NASA agent who got abducted. And then when he was returned, nobody believed him. And he kind of started going crazy trying to find proof and evidence of what took place, because obviously the people that were denying what happened to him were covering it up. They understood what took place. They were just covering things up. So he goes into this whole big journey, finding proof, finding others who have connected to the same experiences. And he goes, yep, there's a cover up taking place. And it was just an incredible shift right at around the climax, close to the end of the movie, where it goes from being this conspiracy kind of movie into being a movie where it's showing teachings and premise and methodology on how to shift physical reality. and how to bend things like a perception of time. It was just even some of the technology that they brought in. So they had some stuff in their arms, and what they did is they took this circular ring and they dropped it around their arm, and from the middle of the ring, it separate the like the thumb trick, right? And it separates the two halves of the forearm by a band of light, and that light is still connecting the forearm biologically, so the pieces don't die or anything, right? And you can put it back together. And I'm mentioning this to some people who I know have been in the military since like, 60, 70 plus years. And they go, oh yeah, I remember seeing prototype versions of that back in like 70s, 80s type thing. I go, yeah, I'm not surprised at all. So there's so much stuff for us to be able to take in at this particular time. My best, I guess the best thing that I can say to all of us as we're going through it, whether we're just receiving information, whether we're observing the events, whether we're in part and taking part in the events, do not judge what's happening. Don't judge what's happening. Please don't. I can promise you the safest place for any one of us to be spiritually, psychologically, emotionally is in such a state of faith and belief that your frequency is in alignment with the best physical experience of earth and life that you can be right now. I promise you that. If that's the belief structure, no matter what things look like around you, it brings it back. So the results and the end point, I don't even want to say the end point because it's not about the destination. The results will eventually feed into that state of frequency. But the indifference of life is going to take a process that just may not make sense to the human brain. So don't try to make sense of it, because the human brain wasn't designed for that. We were designed to experience what's happening in the right now and discern the pieces of the immediate now. But we don't try to use this to comprehend all of this. Let all of this take place in the now and just be present and experience. Lots of mind-blowing things that are going to be revealed to it. Yes, you betcha there are, Carolyn. You betcha. I truly feel that at this particular time, one of the things that I was getting at earlier, why I feel like we're bridging these ancient cultures with the new development and the new evolutionary process of things, is because we're supposed to be creating the next Atlantis, the next Lemuria, the next Egypt. These are supposed to be the next versions of societal culture that we're going into. And I had just seen a video about this a little bit ago too. I think it was just a day or so ago. And they were talking about the Tartaria culture, where Tartarian teachings and science and methodology and art was global. It was a thing. Like, where we look at some of the ancient cities, right? And the architecture and the way that it was literally harnessing and utilizing the free energy of the planet and providing for everyone in the local vicinity. When we look at the intricacy of some of these things, these ancient architectures and the math and the science and the imagination, the creativity, the artistry, the blending of all of these incredible elements to create these things that were also energy sustainable and providing for communities. Think about the mindset of society in order to be in a state to actually thrive doing something like that. They weren't working 9 to 5, paying tax bullshit job societies. That's not how things operated back then. It was much, much closer to the sustainable aspect of people had what they needed when they needed it. So there was no room for greed. Greed had such a low vibration on the totem pole, it basically didn't exist. When we have abundance, greed has no room at the table anymore because greed wants the whole table to itself. But if the abundance is already filling up the table, greed has no space there anymore. And it's so interesting because greed is so, oh, I want everything, I want it all to myself. And then it minimizes how it's received as well. Because when we open up that table, we're also allowing more space for more to come to that table as well. Yes, other people can come eat at the table too, but that's the point. Those other people that are coming to eat at the table are also going to bring stuff to the table. So getting back to this way of harmonizing and truly combining ourselves with art, with passion, with living life, truly living life, and allowing that thriving desire to engage in our deepest passions in life, to be our contributions to society. I can't think of a better way to live. I truly can't. So I feel like this is where we're headed. The next stage of it is going to be a little different than some of the past civilizations, I feel, though, because again, they were early. They were early human civilizations and societies. So if we're taking those same resources and knowledge, and now we're adding it to the capacity that we have now, and this isn't just a personal capacity, I'm also talking about things like technological capacity, where if we can take those same basic teachings of DNA recombination and restructuring, and we add it to technological advancement and prowess. Well, this is where we get stuff like that ring band that can open up an arm, and now we can go in and fix an arm internally without ever making a single incision to the body. This is where we get things like Star Trek simulator, the food dispenser, where you can literally get whatever the hell you want programmed. And all that it does is takes the atoms of the entire universe that's around it and forms them into the program. That's it. It's not fake food. It's actual real material. It's real stuff. It's all of the same things that would comprise what we would consider to be a meal on this earth. It's simply using technology to do that with the atoms rather than doing it in a natural process. So there are so many things that I feel like we're going to be able to advance into in this next big societal jump. That's going to take us closer to a Star Trek like society. Star Trek, Star Wars, I really do feel like we're moving with the next societal jump. That's where we're moving towards. I don't think we're devolving. I think we're evolving. I think there's a big difference. But at the same time, we're still stewards of this planet. And in order to actually go productively and efficiently into the cosmos and become these interstellar peacekeepers, we also have to know how to be stewards. And that starts here, being stewards of our planet, stewards of our societies, of our people, mastering that process so that we can then extend that as we extend our presence in the cosmos. I also want to be clear, we do already have people out there. So there have been space forces for I don't even know how long that have been sending ships and colonels and space teams out there. Like, this is a real thing. I'm talking about it more on a much more global scale, where you want to plan Starship Troopers type thing. You want to plan a vacation to the beaches of Zanzibar or whatever. You go on your vacation to your beach Zanzibar. Who gives a shit? It's going to be really, really interesting to see where we're headed, and I'm super excited from it as well. Some of the other comments. This will be next level up from the last realm. Shay says, yeah, it's so, and this is where I'm very clear on how I'm not even necessarily looking at things linearly anymore, where I don't want to say it's going to be a next level up from the previous realm. I feel like what we're doing is shifting our frequency to a higher state, which is simply shifting the realm that we get to experience. So within the context of your sentiment, I completely agree with you, Shay, that we are elevating that frequency beyond the realm that we were just experiencing. And it's going to be epic as far as a physical experience is concerned. That being said, going back to the no judgment process, how we get there may not make a whole lot of sense at first, or maybe ever. So I truly am very, very subscribed to the fact and the belief of my faith, and my structure of belief is what's going to course me through all of those theories of events. And I already know that I'm living in the reality of that frequency within me, my preferred chosen frequency. Carolyn Ross, each matrix level has its own frequency. Well, that's an interesting way to articulate that question. Each dimension has its own frequency, first, second, third, fourth. The dimensions are, and I want to think of the best way to put this. The dimensions are what hold pockets of experience. And what I mean by that is, and I think I've talked about this before, first dimension to me is conceptual. It has to be, everything has to be born from conception. So thought, sound, something has to be conceived into the universe. That's step one. Step two is that conception takes form. That's the second dimension, where we see a straight line, a box, a figure, whatever we want to make that conception into, it takes form. But the two dimension is still influenced by the conceiver or by what conceived it. So it doesn't have a will of its own. That's where third dimension comes in. Third dimension is this, it's a middle ground between conception and highest oneness of experience, because conception has to do, and second dimension of being influenced and manipulated by conception, it's all playing with the elements of quote unquote separation. It's dealing with different pieces and seeing how those different pieces form and alchemize to create something new. Third dimension being the bridging ground, that conception that was at the will of the conceiver now takes on a will and a form of its own and gets to express its own conception into the universe, and then begins to conceive itself. So the conception then becomes the conceiver. It takes on its own life. And from there, we elevate more and more into the collective oneness without separation, the higher that we go up the dimensional ladder. Each one of those dimensions has a band of experience, a realm of experience that souls can filter into. Third dimension is physical, material experience. It's again that conception taking life and then expressing itself, starting to conceive beyond itself. The third dimension has the multiverse to it. Now, I also have to say that coming at it from the perception that we're currently coming at it, we're looking at it through a third dimensional lens. Multiverse connects through all of the dimensions, but here it becomes a physical, tangible thing. It becomes like a prism, like we've talked about. When you get up to fifth dimension, for example, it just, everything is all at once. The entirety of the multiverse, through all the dimensions, through all of the different variations of everything that creation has to offer, is simply instantaneous and simultaneous. That's fifth dimension. Here it becomes more of a tangible, viewable thing where we can look at it from all the different angles of the prism of the multiverse. I personally haven't quantified that as a matrix before. What I've looked at as a matrix is the conditioning and the programming, the structures of belief, and literally the way that those belief systems and those perceptions of belief are programmed into us. That's what I consider to be matrices. Those are literal codings and programs that we can rewrite, or we allow them to write themselves into our programming and then affect the way that reality presents itself to us. You're very welcome, Carolyn. The multiverse, yes, I wouldn't quantify it as a matrix. To me, the matrix is more about the coding and the programming itself. And that is something that's very tangible, but it's also something that exists, as far as I know, everywhere in the third dimension, because third dimension is so malleable. It's meant to be that way. It's meant to be tangible. Rising above it is simply a testament to show our evolutionary prowess within how we're expressed as beings of creation. It doesn't mean that we're better than anything else. It just simply shows that we have that ability to actually understand matrices, but then become, just like the movie says, the one, and rewrite the matrix. We can rewrite the matrix within ourselves. We can rewrite matrices within other people. It's just coding. It's simply electrical and frequency information. And this is something that is super in every one of our control to start to understand more about, and how we can affect it, and how it affects us. That being said, we are now at 1 minute past. Oh my God, we're late today. Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I think that's it. I got nothing else to say. Thank you guys so much for being here. It was a lovely chat again. I can't wait to see you guys all next week. Keep thriving, keep aliving, and keep jiving. We'll see you next time.